Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today we celebrate the unveiling of the first ever iPhone. It happened on this day in the year 2007, and right away it was a huge watershed moment in the world of technology. The iPhone combined so many individual pieces of technology which existed before it, all into one device that you could hold in your hand. It was a television, a radio, a record player, a camera, a movie camera, a calculator, a personal computer, a calendar, so many other things, an abacus. It was all of these things in one. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't the first smartphone. Motorola had one. There was the Sidekick. There was the BlackBerry. But this was the one that transformed the smartphone into something for businessmen, for wealthy people, for people like Paris Hilton, into something that everybody everywhere needed to have all the time. And even the Android phones of today, I have an Android phone to be fair, they're modeled on this device, this iPhone that Steve Jobs introduced in 2007, that was radically ahead of its time. And I think sometimes we forget that because the entire tech industry has somewhat stagnated, including Apple in many ways, since the tragic death of Steve Jobs. But when Steve was in charge, the things he was doing were always 10 years or so ahead of what the general expectations were. Now, music played a huge part of the famous launch of the iPhone. He played Tommy Two-Tone, he played the Beatles, he played the Talking Heads. John Mayer, the musician, was there with him at the event because Steve wanted to make it clear that this device would allow you to bring your music collection with you everywhere you went, and that connectivity, constant connectivity in most cases, to the World Wide Web meant that you could even listen to music that you hadn't necessarily downloaded. And so we see the full integration of sort of the mobile jukebox, the mobile music library really begin to take hold. Now, Steve Jobs had already revolutionized the world of music because in the early 2000s, the music industry was reeling and they've never fully recovered by any means. In 1999, Napster was the entity, if you will, was the technological development that dealt that first big blow to the music industry by allowing people to share their music files with one another throughout the world. And Napster didn't charge. Now, what the record labels should have done is buy Napster or do a joint venture with Napster to try to say, this is a great technology. People are using it. They're never going to not use it. And even if you get rid of Napster, another Napster clone will just pop up. They didn't foresee that. They were stupid, and instead they took it upon themselves to sue Napster out of existence. And of course, predictably, the Napster clones, if you will, the Kazars and the LimeWires and the others sprung up, and the cat was out of the bag, and there was no putting this particular pussy back in the sack. So the music industry didn't know what to do, but Steve Jobs did. He said, we need to create a way for people to legally download music in a manner that is easier, more consistent, and more streamlined than the post Napster illegal downloading tools. And he said the way to do this is to create a legal digital database of just about every song that has ever been recorded, every record, every piece of music, and allow people to buy individual tracks for $1 and not a penny more. And if you do this, people will go back to buying music legally. And the music industry put up a fuss saying, $1 for a single, that will never work. He said, well, okay, you can either do it that way or you can die. And so Steve Jobs had them by the balls and they acquiesced because they knew that there was no other off ramp. And from that moment forward, we see the commercial music being more and more in the hands of the tech companies rather than the old school record companies who by now have been more or less reduced to PR agencies for musicians or musical entertainers. And we see that with this big big streaming companies. We see that still with Apple. We see that with Amazon. We see that with Block, which owns Tidal. The big movers and shakers in the music industry are now big tech, not big record. Um, and that really all began with Steve Jobs and iTunes and the associated iPod. And when the iPhone came out, all of the features and more that were in the music derived iPod were in this new device. And much more than that, the iPhone has become something where people can record music, edit music, share music, do make music videos, do all sorts of things with music in one single device that most people have. And that in addition to the aspect of consuming music, listening to music, the iPhone's ability to help people to more easily produce and create music was another huge piece of revolutionary technology. And I really put it down to Steve Jobs being a visionary because since he died, the iPhone hasn't changed all that much. The memory gets bigger, the processors get faster, the cameras get better, but the basic fundamental ingredients were what Steve Jobs presented to the world on this day in 2007. I think that overall it has helped to democratize the listening of music and democratize the making of music. We can now be exposed to new and interesting kinds of music from throughout the world, no matter where we live. And I think that is a huge bonus. So, for all the people lament the modern age and wish to go back to the admittedly very cool era of analog music in record stores, the future's going to come whether you like it or not, and I definitely think Steve Jobs' invention has done far more good than bad for the artistic expression of people that would have never got a second look by the old corrupt record industry. That's my point of view. Let me know what you think. As always, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.